Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Our community is filled with diverse stories, and we recognize that our story begins with the Indigenous peoples of this land. We recognize that we are broadcasting this lecture on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for millennia, and we would like to honor the centuries of Indigenous peoples who walked on Turtle Island before us. My name is Adrian, and I'm the Visitor Services Coordinator here at the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center. Welcome to tonight's lecture, Lost and Historic Architecture in St. Catharines. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We hope these lectures provide a bit of historical joy and, of course, also spark imagination and exploration into our city's rich history. Tonight's lecture is the penultimate lecture in our spring lecture series, which means there is only, there is only one remaining after tonight, and it is titled Hold the Torch High, Remembering War in St. Catharines. Let me just check on everything. Hold on, I am experiencing technical difficulties. Okay, no, we're good. Sorry, that was me. Okay. Right, so after that, sorry about that, everybody. After that, we're going to take a bit of a break from the lecture series for the summertime. But don't worry, we'll be back in the fall with more great topics, including rowing in St. Catharines, hoteling, and some other great stories and topics. Please stay tuned to our social media channels for more information. In the meantime, we'll be continuing on with a lot of other virtual public programs, including Facebook Live, some fun summertime activities on our blog, stcatharinesmuseumblog.com, and of course, our 2 podcasts, Museum Chat Live and 1 Hour in the Past. Thank you again to everyone joining us tonight. A quick note regarding interaction on tonight's lecture. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can post them in the chat box. It looks like most everybody knows how to use the chat box, so that is awesome. It's nice to see everyone tonight. Thank you again for joining us. If you do have any trouble, you can just let us know in the chat box or in the comments below. If you are using a tablet or a smartphone, you might only be able to use the comment section, and maybe you can post questions and comments there. Hopefully that all works out for you. There is a 30-second to 1-minute lag. So if it seems like the moment has passed, but you still have questions or comments, that's okay. Post it anyway, and we'll go back and address it at the end of the presentation. Furthermore, you're welcome to send questions and comments to our email, and we'll get back to you. We hope this format works well, and we welcome any feedback if you have any difficulty. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us on tonight's lecture. The old courthouse, the old Welland House Hotel, the Robertson School. The built environment that surrounds us defines our daily lives and helps to give us and our community identity. Buildings and streetscapes dictate our walk to school or work. They help us to distinguish place. We often forget about them or avoid them. Sometimes we fix them up and give them new life. Other times we tear them down. Most of our local architectural styles aren't unique to St. Catharines. Styles and building types, both industrial and public, for this evening's talk are typical of other manufacturing centers in Ontario. Yet the buildings and their stories, no matter their design, are what helps us to define our city and our community. These buildings are our everyday and immediate history. The city and its built environment act as the backdrop to which we play out the story of our lives. Surely that backdrop is worth examining. In his paper from 1984 entitled, quote, "Our Great Age of Destruction," end quote, local historian and author Robert Taylor commented on the changing streetscapes around the city. Quote, through the wholesale demolition of our local landmarks, the sense of place and of community identity has declined. Our architectural heritage acts as a reminder of where and what here is. It is a non-renewable resource, as important as unpolluted air and water. Unfortunately, St. Catharines has ravaged its inheritance of beautiful and historically significant buildings and sacrificed much of its special identity. Our demolition epoch is as much a part of our history as the great era of canal building. The demolition companies have played nearly as great a role in changing our environment as did the original Welland Canal Company. As we examine lost and historic architecture throughout my presentation this evening, I'd like you to think about the buildings and streetscapes which have contributed to your experiences in the city. Which of those streetscapes or buildings have defined you? And I'd love to hear about those at the end of the presentation in the chat box. A quick note on a quick word on the source material for my talk today. Of course, I used mostly standard images or other images from the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center or from the St. Catharines Public Library. Research, reference, and other files. We have tons of reference files on lots of these buildings here at the St. Catharines Museum, but also some great sources like Glimpses of the Past, which appeared in the St. Catharines Standard. Local architectural books produced by the museum, of course, and others. And of course, my favorite, what's up on the slide right now, is the title page for the fire insurance plans. This is the key for all the other pages in the book. And if you've been following along with our virtual programming over the last few months, and even as long as you've known me, the fire insurance plans are pretty much by far my favorite archival document. And we'll see a lot more of them tonight. I also used a lot of business directories to help out with that. Okay. Quick note on my presentation tonight. I've styled tonight's presentation a little bit like a walking tour. Lucky for us, we get to sit and enjoy the air conditioning and maybe some stable indoor weather, depending on what the weather decides to do tonight. But that's sort of the idea behind my presentation today, is that it's going to be a bit of a digital walking tour. But unfortunately, that means you don't get to count any steps. You can all walk along in your chairs if you really need your steps counted, like I do. The added benefit of the digital walking tour is that we aren't harnessed to geography, and so we can jump around the city. So it should be fun. I'm going to jump all over the place. By no means is this an exhaustive presentation or a walking tour. If we tried to cover every single significant heritage building in the city, I'm sure you all agree, we'd be going for hours and hours. So no doubt that you'll find that there are some gaps in this presentation, particularly the lack of residential buildings on our tour tonight. The point of this tour is not to walk you through a textbook of heritage buildings, but more to connect you with a part of our past that is deeply significant and visible to all of us. So if I miss a building or I miss your favorite building, please do forgive me. So without further ado, let us begin our walking tour. And I'm gonna turn my camera off because I don't want any, I don't want my camera to get in the way. Sorry. Okay. Here we have the now demolished Lincoln County Jail, which once stood at 116 Niagara Street. With the relocation of the county seat to St. Catharines, not only did the city require a courthouse, it also was in need of a jail. Toronto architect W.G. Storm, who also designed Osgoode Hall Law School at the University of Toronto, designed this vaguely Romanesque structure, which opened in 1866. Despite its purpose, the jail was considered to be an attractive building by many residents. And in fact, a few had their wedding photos taken in front of the building. Despite its purpose, the jail was considered to be, unlike its companion courthouse, the jail is no longer part of our built landscape. In 1973, the Niagara Regional Detention Center opened and the Niagara Street site was closed. The building was demolished 3 years later. Here we have my favorite part of all presentations, my ability to draw on the Zoom screen. So if you're wondering whereabouts it was, there is the Lincoln County Jail there, and I've zoomed in on the right-hand side. Here it is here. Another great reason why I love the fire insurance plans is because they can be so detailed. And if you look really closely, the line, it's sort of the rectangle line that outlines the yard is a stone wall. So that's the big jail wall. Pretty neat. The only thing about the annotate tool here is I just have to clear all the drawings before I continue on, or the circles follow along with us. All right, we're gonna jump. We're jumping. You can get your steps in this way really easily. Just pretend you've walked all that way and you'll get lots of steps. Okay. Another public building lost to history in our city is the Carnegie Library, formerly located at 58 Church Street. It's named the Carnegie or Carnegie, depending on the pronunciation, library because of the $20,000 donation from the Carnegie Foundation towards its construction. The building was designed by Sidney R. Badgley in the Roman classical style and completed in 1905. The library was constructed on land donated by the McSloy family and was a central part of the city. In fact, just looking at this amazing building, you can just feel the institutional style and feeling of this building. This building is intended to make you think about what's inside. First, definitely perhaps books, but also it's meant to give you a sense of reverence before you go in. It's meant to sort of humble you. This is quite an edifice. The decision by the province to build a new courthouse sounded the death knell for the library. The building was in short order declared structurally unsound as well, and it was demolished in 1977. Architectural remnants from the library can be found here at the museum at the Discovery Park that's just outside the gates of the backyard of the museum. So if you're out for a bike ride, over the next little while, you can come and check out some of the stone parts of the museum. For example, we have, I gotta find the there we go. We have one of these guys that is in the yard. And then also the nameplate, which is here covered up under flags for the Governor General's visit. The nameplate says St. Catharines Public Library is actually at the St. Catharines Public Library, just on Church Street, basically across from the cathedral. So you can check that out. Clear all drawings. There we go. Okay, I was supposed to advance through some slides, so I forgot to. So that will be a theme of tonight, that I have more photos that I forget and remember. But I just want to pause here and talk a little bit about this intersection, because this is quite the intersection in St. Catharines. I've drawn up our fire insurance plans, page 3 and page 4. Again, if you haven't seen them and you're not familiar with the fire insurance plans, they're enormous. Probably measure 2 feet square-ish, maybe 1.5 feet square-ish. So they're big. And I've drawn them up here. They're not perfectly matched, but they're pretty close, to give you a sense of the intersection of James and Church. So quite a lot of change has happened. And I like to talk about this corner and this intersection a lot, because most of this change has happened between approximately the 1950s, 1960s, and 1980. And I'm just going to highlight a huge amount of change in this intersection. And just by looking, I bet most people who are local can identify some of the big changes, like core block on, oh, sorry, not core block. What am I saying? Some of the big office buildings, King and Queen, that big office blocks that are, sorry, let me use my annotate tool. Some of the big office buildings that are now here and here and here and here. Also Market Square, which nice has an indoor building, which is now here. We also have the City Hall building, which went oops, that's probably too big. Probably went there in the 1930s, and then a nice big addition as well. Sorry, woo! There we go. I'm having too much fun on my annotate tool here. Anyway, and then we also have the Courthouse building, which kind of goes like that, something like that. Anyway, you're all familiar with it. But it's such a huge amount of change in such a short period of time. About 30 years, I'd say, most of this intersection was changed. And that made, I'm going to clear all my drawings here, and that made for a really exciting new program for us here at the St. Catharines Museum during our closure, called the Lego Challenge Built Heritage Edition. And as you can see here, I've drawn up the maps again. And over the last 6 weeks, we've been building some buildings out of Lego. And if you've been following along with the Lego Challenge, you'll know we started with the public way scales, which are right here and this building here. And then we also continued with the Clendenin House. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Hold on, there we go. Clendenin House, which became the city offices. And again, for all these details, I'm going to make you go and watch all the videos of the Lego Challenge so that I get more video views. You guys know how it works. We also built Knox Presbyterian Church, which is one of the buildings on the Lego Challenge that's still there today. We built the library, which we just talked about. We built St. Joseph's Convent, which is on this corner of Jameson Church. And then this week, we're building the old courthouse, and that'll be the end of the Lego Challenge Built Heritage Edition for this round. I definitely want to do more, probably a residential and maybe even an industrial challenge as well. But I thought I would just encourage you all to go and watch the videos. They are on Facebook and Instagram, and also on our blog, stcatharinesmuseumblog.com. And you can check out all the Lego challenges. And if you have any more, or if you are a Lego person, if you have any youngsters who like Lego, or you yourself are a certified Legoist, please consider joining the Lego Challenge. You don't have to do it, just because the videos have already happened. You can do it through the summer if you want. And you can find all the challenge videos and information on our blog and on Facebook and Instagram, as I mentioned. So the idea here, again, was that there's just so much change in such a short period of time. And so I really picked this intersection for that reason. And this intersection, again, was the location of just so many important civic buildings. So it's like, yeah, many intersections in the city have changed in the last 100 years. and in a very quick time. But this particular intersection had just had so many important civic buildings that most people would have been connected with. And so just imagine, and it probably would have had an immense change and impact, a dramatic impact on people's sense of place when the changes occurred. Could you imagine changing every building at this same intersection today in the next 20 years? It would be a pretty dramatic and probably have a huge impact on how we encounter our downtown streetscapes. So enough about the Lego challenge. I thought about bringing the courthouse in its current form to show you, but it's on 2 big Lego sheets, and it's not ready. I'm afraid of it falling apart if I move it right now. Okay, enough about the Lego challenge. Let's go on to our next tour. Next tour stop. Next, we're going to jump to Meryton and visit the old Central School. Central Public School was a wonderful late Victorian 6-room and 3-story school. It was built in 1893 and held classes until its final academic year in 1979, when it was torn down for the repointing, of Glendale and Merritt Streets. So you can see a great, this one's a 1940s fire insurance plan. And to give you a sense of where it would have been, let me get my annotate tool again. And here is the school there. And this isn't quite the intersection that we know in Meryton today. Of course, this stone building still exists. This part is the Stone Mill Inn today, and Johnny Rocco's restaurant with a little bit of a addition here and a parking lot. So Merritt Street's pretty much the same, but Glendale doesn't quite cross over in this kind of way anymore. And so is repointed, and if you kind of draw sort of a straight line, it sort of gets run over by the road. So Glendale was repointed at that point. I'm just going to clear this because they're going to follow along. And have a lovely photo of the room 6 class with the principal, Mr. Foster, there on the right. This picture is from 1904. They all look so happy. And here's another photo of that intersection again, a nice little closer to aerial photo here that shows a little bit of what the intersection used to be. So of course, everyone probably recognizes this building here as Johnny Rocco's. In fact, there's a big sign right there that says Johnny Rocco's and the Stone Mill Inn. And then we've got a little bit of parking lot, but really the intersection kind of heads through over a little bit closer today to the building, as most of you know. And only just a few years ago, Belle and I have talked many, many times about the tearing up of the railway here that used to go by. That only happened just a few years ago. And of course, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner down here, you'll see a canal pond where basically the LCBO is today. So lots of interesting history, but we're really here to talk about the Central School. And I love this picture because it gives you a really good sense of what that streetscape would have been like and what the community would have been like. And it definitely is a sorely missed building in the Meryton landscape today. Okay, off we go back downtown St. Catharines to the Federal Building, or as some people know it, the Old Post Office. Located at the intersection of King and Queen Streets, downtown St. Catharines, the Federal Building was a great example of the mid-Victorian style called the Second Empire. And I love the Second Empire style because it's kind of the haunted house style. If you think about a haunted house, the typical, even like a clip art or a typical haunted house, or even like the Addams family's house, it's a Second Empire style house because it's got mansard roofing. Oops, I just put my there we go, mansard roofing like this, but also this lovely little sort of ornamental fencing or gates at the top kind of gives it a spooky feeling, especially in the popular culture sense of the Addams family. This building signaled the presence of the federal government in the city, and actually similar public federal buildings went up across the country in the 1870s and 1880s. Here's our fire insurance plan. If you're wondering where we are, it's here on the corner of Church and Queen. The tiled mansard roof is a hallmark of the Baroque influenced Second Empire style, as are the high windows, elegant moldings, and either gabled or elliptical dormers. I'll go back to that picture so you can get good shot of that. I'm having lots of difficulty with my PowerPoint this evening. Thank you for bearing with me, everybody. The St. Catharines Federal Building hosted the post office on the main floor, with customs and excise offices upstairs. Another of the St. Catharines lost buildings, the Federal Building was torn down in 1964. Few examples of this style of architecture remain in the city. Again, you get a really good sense of the streetscape. Okay, off we go. You're getting your steps in, everybody. The Sovereign Bank of Canada, established in 1901, built this imposing structure in 1907 for its St. Catharines banking operations. However, before it even got a chance to open, the Sovereign Bank of Canada was taken over by the Bank of Nova Scotia. By January 1908, the Sovereign Bank of Canada, because of its zealous pursuit of business, had accumulated a substantial number of bad loan accounts. It arranged that its liabilities would be guaranteed by 12 major banks at the time, and it would liquidate its affairs. In 1907, the St. Catharines Standard referred to the building as, quote, the handsomest office building in St. Catharines, which occupies one of the most important corners of the city, end quote. Another assessment read, quote, its narrow height, offset by its ornate and heavy cornices, this structure is supposed to suggest rectitude, high-mindedness, and fiscal reliability to investors, end quote. It is very much a bank building built in the Renaissance Palazzo style. Offices occupied the upper floors of the 4-story commercial building. Nothing says bank building like this. The current, this building, I should add, was replaced by the current bank building, which is still the Bank of Nova Scotia, in 1968. This is one of my favorite buildings, the Prendergast, whoops, if I can say it properly, the Prendergast block. One of the first buildings from the Second Canal era to be demolished was the Prendergast block on St. Paul Street. When it was built, it was a modern innovation of office and retail space, most famously housing the James D. Tate Dry Goods Company. Built in the 1850s by William Hamilton Merritt Jr. and named for his mother's family, the demolition of this building was just as significant as the building itself. Seen as the beginning of the post-war redevelopment of downtown, the building was torn down in 1949. It was the first major real estate development in the downtown in over 20 years and was hailed as such. The beginning of the end of a now highly romanticized era in St. Catharines' history of industry and business. Many regret the decision to tear down the architectural gem, which held many familiar features to Rodman Hall, another Merritt family structure, including Romanesque peaked gables, and stone facade. Just looking at that building, you can see the similarities to Rodman Hall. This is a great photo from the 1918 Victory Parade. Okay, we're gonna jump. We're gonna get some more steps in. We're going back to Meriton, back down to Meriton. If the Lincoln County Courthouse building is the most iconic in St. Catharines, then most iconic sort of public building in St. Catharines, then the Independent Rubber Company building is the most iconic industrial building in St. Catharines. Built in 1881 as the Beaver Cotton Mill, the site took great advantage of locks 14, 15, and 16 of the Second Welland Canal, and is one of the few remnants of the industrial dominance of Meriton between 1845 and approximately 1910. By the end of the First World War, the manufacturing industry had changed so drastically that many large milling factories began to sit empty. Domtar Paper was the last to use and own the site, especially since they existed. They also owned this building, and so they own this building too. Here's our Independent Rubber facility. And Domtar Paper, again, was the last to use and own the site, using the buildings to store paper products until, unfortunately, the palatial 6-story factory building was destroyed by a fire. There we go. Was destroyed by a fire in 1961. The smaller building that once housed steam sheds and water turbines was completely reconstructed in a life and heritage-saving renovation to house the Keg restaurant in 2001. Highly publicized renovation, I should add, and it really did save the building. You can just imagine the imposition of that enormous factory building on the landscape today if you think about what is there today. So here's our existing Keg building, and I'm sure most of our audience who has visited this building before knows there's a little door here for our bridge that goes over this the Sluicen races, the raceways here, down from the weirs and the lock. And then this building is a building that's gone today. That's the building that burned down in the 60s. And so you can kind of get a sense of how big this building would have been, because Swiss Chalet is here-ish, probably bigger than that. Harvey's is there. There's another part of the strip mall there, and they've got some cool architecture things, remnants. And this is the drive-through. Sorry, I'm having too much fun. And then the bank is over here somewhere. And so you get the sense that this building was just enormous. And it's possible that most people who worked at the factory, whether the Beaver Cotton Mills or Independent Rubber, no matter what factory it is, lived somewhat locally. And so likely they would have been able to see the factory from where they lived. And that has a really huge impact on your sense of place and your sense of streetscape, and also just your life. Think about if you lived so close to your workplace that you could see it every day. That would be very different from the kind of life that most of us live today. Okay, we're jumping away again. We're going back downtown. See what I mean by a digital walking tour? We can just jump wherever we want. It's pretty great. All right. Today's Welland House Hotel is not representative of its rich past as one of the city's 3 major tourist destinations in the 19th century, especially because today the Welland House sits empty. The Welland House Hotel, The Stevenson House and Springbank Hotel were extremely popular hotels and spas, famous for their access to underground saltwater springs. When William Hamilton Merritt began building a mill along the shores of 12 Mile Creek, way back in the 1820s, he discovered a salt spring and mineral waters flowing from an underground spring. The water was boiled, leaving the salt, which was a valuable commodity at the time, though super difficult to process. In later years, it was discovered that drinking or bathing in the mineral water could cure a variety of ailments. That's all because of the Victorian sense of medicine. This prompted the development of 2 spa resorts on Yates Street, the Stevenson House and Springbank Hotel, allowing vacationers from far and wide to test the healing powers of the mineral waters. By the 1800s, spa resorts were no longer, or sorry, by the late 1800s, the end of the Victorian period, spa resorts were no longer fashionable vacation destinations, as improved railroad transportation links made other options possible. When Springbank closed in 1889, the building became the first home of Ridley College, but most of the structure, unfortunately, was destroyed by fire in 1903. The Welland House Hotel has had a long varied history, and has served as a hotel for most of its life until most recently it was a student residence downtown. What's pretty interesting is that the main building itself has mostly remained unchanged. And I just want to go back and forth a little bit, bear with me, to show some of that change. Excuse me. What's really interesting is we have this passageway, which is actually from, it's not there anymore, but which is actually from the previous slide. So there's this wood structure passageway between the large Welland House Hotel brick building on the left and the other brick building on the right, which was actually the mineral baths, as you can see from the fire insurance plan. This is why I love the fire insurance plan. Additionally, there were a couple of other rooms included in the complex, I guess you could say. And what's really interesting is you have a couple of nurses rooms and servants' quarters here in this little, what I assume was a house of some kind that's sort of next door to the hotel. So they're basically right on site, ready to be at service. Lots of great stories from the Welland House Hotel. I hope we're sort of getting close to the end, and I hope everyone is thinking about buildings or streetscapes that are important to them, because I'd love to hear about them in the comments at the end, along with your questions, of course. Now we're going to jump over to sort of Queenston Street area and visit the St. Barnabas Anglican Church, or as the postcard says, this old postcard says St. Barnabas English Church. St. Barnabas Anglican began in 1870 as a mission church of St. George's Anglican Church. In 1873, a small wooden church, the St. Barnabas Mission Chapel, was erected on Tasker Street. The current church was built in 1893. The design of the Gothic Revival Church was influenced heavily by the arts and crafts movement, which attempted to revive the craftsmanship and ambiance of early medieval styles. The interior embodies massive timber roof construction, French-style oil-finished work, Germanic and Italian windows, and ochre walls with murals that were somewhat recently painted by Chris Tinkler. The original wooden church, which is over on the right-hand side of the photo, was used as a parish hall until it was demolished in 1935. And shout out to a good friend of mine, Mr. Ben Phelan, who is the organist at St. Barnabas. Now, I also just want to mention that Kathleen and I have done a great podcast episode about the arts and crafts movement, specifically in St. Catharines, as a part of our 1 Hour in the Past podcast. So if you're interested in listening to that and hearing a little bit more about the history of the arts and crafts movement in architecture, you can check out that episode. It's really cool because I'd say a lot of residential properties, especially in sort of the downtown neighborhood or in the older sections between, say, built between the 1890s and maybe the 1930s, late 30s maybe, have huge influences in the arts and crafts style movement. So there's lots of residential examples of that kind of building all around the city. Okay, we're going to jump over to this weird looking building, which doesn't really quite look like this today. It's pretty much the same, but this is a very strange view of this particular building. By the mid 1870s, the Anglican population in West St. Catharines had outgrown a previous church, and the new parish of St. Thomas was opened in 1879. Architect M.C. Beebe, a disciple of the R.R. Richardson School of Boston, designed the building in what's called the Richardson Romanesque style. Probably the most dramatic building, one of the most dramatic buildings in the city, I'd say. Located at the end of Church Street, the structure dominates the streetscape with its colorful red Queenston limestone and its lovely rose window. The 1970s, 80s, and early 90s included some major restoration work on the towers and the bartizans, as well as a new glass enclosed entrance with a raised circular driveway for greater access to the main church. And that's really how we know it today. I wanted to find some interior shots of some of these buildings. And this is a really nice one because it's from the wedding of Eric Bunce and Marjorie Weller, who was the daughter of J.L. Weller, the superintendent of the Welland Canal at the time. And it was their wedding at St. Thomas's in 1915. And if you've been in the inside of the church, pretty much unchanged, except for one major fact. They now use chairs instead of pews. In studying the architectural history of the city, I've learned that the city's history is quite cyclical, which is not unique to St. Catharines. Stores and shops, services and groups come and go. But what is most challenging for us as citizens of this city is when our heritage structures are treated as disposable objects in the way of progress. And so I'll leave today's presentation with asking you to think again about the important buildings in your life and to consider the impact the destruction of those buildings might have an impact on your identity and the identity of your community. Thank you very much again for attending tonight's lecture, everybody. I'm back. If you have any questions about tonight's presentation, you can post them in the comments and in the YouTube chat box to the right-hand side of your screen. If you're using a tablet or smartphone, again, you might not be able to see the chat box, so you can put your questions in the comments below, which I will also check on my other screen. While I give you a few minutes to post your questions in the comments or in the chat box, I'd just like to take another moment to remind you of our last upcoming lecture, which is called Holding the Torch High, Remembering War in St. Catharines. After that, we're going to take a bit of a break, as I mentioned, from the lecture series for the summertime, but don't worry, we'll be back in the fall with more great topics, as I said, including rowing in St. Catharines, hoteling, so you'll hear more about the Welland House Hotel and the Springbank and Stevenson House, and some other great stories and topics from Black history to the First World War to Remembrance Day and Victoria Lawn Cemetery. Lots of great topics coming at you for the fall. If you guys have any topics that you'd like us to do a lecture on, or if you have any ideas, do give us a shout in the chat box, or also in by email as well, and we can organize that for future lectures. This has been such a successful series that we really want to continue it on. So again, please stay tuned to our social media channels for more information. If you love the deep dive nature of a lecture series, why not also try our podcasts? We have 2 podcasts, Museum Chat Live and 1 Hour in the Past. You can catch the podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as well as on our blog, stcatherinesmuseumblog.com. And as I mentioned, there's a really great architecture episode from 1 Hour in the Past about the arts and crafts movement. It's a good time, I promise. Also, I'd like to remind everyone to please give us a like and a follow. As the YouTubers say, smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, and give us a follow on social media channels to stay in the loop with all of our virtual programming during the museum's closure. Again, sometimes you might see our posts because of some algorithm. Maybe you're friends with someone who likes the museum, but maybe you don't actually click like the museum. So make sure you click like or click follow on Twitter and Instagram so that you don't miss any information. I'd also like to remind everyone to check out the blog, of course, stcatherinesmuseumblog.com, and you can smash that subscribe button and it will actually send you an email to your email whenever we put out a new blog post. All right, let's take a look-see at the chat box. Out of the corner of my eye, I see lots of interaction, so I'm really looking forward to checking this out. Okay, I'm gonna go back up because Belle had some comments and hello to everybody. I'm gonna go like this so you can see me looking. Okay, there we go. Hello to everybody. It's really nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining in. Belle says, Badgley built many buildings that call for reverence, including churches and rather famous music hall in Toronto, which totally makes sense. Massey Hall and tons of other buildings like that, for sure. Certain architects were not pigeonholed, but specialized in sort of specific buildings. For example, Victoria School and Connaught Public School were built by the same architecture team. And you can see that they're basically identical schools, one on Niagara Street and one on Prince Street. And then also Memorial School and Edith Cavell and some of those schools were built by similar architecture teams. So a lot of the time you get similar styles in and around the city, if depending on who, especially the school board orders a couple of schools, right? So you get very similar buildings all around the city. Belle says, in 1916, my dad was born at the maternity hospital in the Welland house. Neat. Oh, that's awesome. Really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Belle. That's great. Stan says, thank you very much for your kind comments, everyone. Stan says, most important building, the Carnegie Public Library and St. Joseph's School on Facer. Awesome. Those are great contributions. Thank you. Hi, Jerry. Thank you very much for your comment. That's super great. Jen, yes, we look forward to the fall lectures too. There's going to be some really neat ones that are going to make you think. And we're excited to get going on some research and writing. So awesome. Laurel says, my important building, Buchanan Hall. Ah, yes, Buchanan Hall, which is located behind Lester B. Pearson Park and the Kiwanis Center on, I believe it's Niagara Street, if I'm right. I've been there many times. It's now it's had a bunch of different lives. Talking about a building that's had a bunch of different lives, Buchanan House has had tons of lives, and that's probably why it's endearing to so many, but today it serves as our HR building in the city. So it's super fun to go to a really unique building. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Hospital looks like a Lego project gone wild. Oh, Lego challenge for the hospital would be really great. I'm going to write that one down. We'll see that one soon, I think. Very good. That would be a hard one. And I don't know if I have enough Lego because it was a huge complex, as you know. Might have to build an earlier version of it when it was a lot smaller. This is really great. Thanks everybody for posting buildings and maybe engaging in a little nostalgia with me. This is really fun. I love the interaction. Can you tell that I haven't talked to anyone in a while? Laurel says, Port Mansion, of course. There's some great dinner theater and just basic and just music theater in Port Dalhousie. I don't think we visited Port Dalhousie on our lecture series tonight, and that's bad on me. There's tons of really cool historic buildings in Port Dalhousie, some that are still there that house local businesses, or even the local, the Lincoln Fabrics building, which was once Maple Leaf Rubber, which will soon, hopefully maybe, be turned into condos. And that's a really great, again, a story about life-saving business for a great historic building. My important building would be the Canada Haircloth Company building. Again, I've left so many buildings out and I feel bad, but thank you for contributing them to tonight's lecture. Of course, that beautiful building downtown, originally built in the 1880s and then added to later on by the McSloy family, who owned the Canada Haircloth Company. And again, another life-saving kind of business and structure arrangement, now housing Brock University's Marilyn I. Walker School of Fine and Performing Arts, which is really great because it's sort of I think you can go in. So it's sort of semi-open to the public, not now, but when school's in session. And they've kept a lot of the historic features like floors and big sliding barn doors and lots of really cool spaces and a mix of sort of modern renovation to house the school, and then lots of historic elements. So if you ever get a chance, definitely take a tour of the Haircloth building downtown. It's really cool. And last year we did a really cool program about the Haircloth building and some of the people who worked there in the early days and also into the 1970s and 1980s. So it would be, you're right, Belle and Jen, it would be really cool lecture. And that one for sure would be a lecture on its own. And I think I might invite some people to join me to talk about what it's like to work there today. That would be fun. Ridley College, oh my gosh, Ridley College, another great, not only historic building, but buildings and campus. That's really great. Hi, Brian. Brian says, interesting talk. I remember many of those buildings. I was saddened when the old Wright Middleburger house was demolished in the early 1970s. Yes, there are many casualties, residential casualties in the city. And you also mentioned, Brian also mentions the Shikaluna houses on St. Paul Street Crescent were also demolished. Yes, many residential casualties, more than I would say industrial and public buildings, probably because they were in more number, but also because, most residential buildings would be in private hands. So yeah, lots and lots of residential buildings. And honestly, residential walking tour is maybe 2 or 3 lectures, but certainly overdue on my part. So I need to do some more research. Or Brian, if you have one ready, we'd love to have you as a guest. But certainly we definitely need a residential tour of some of our really cool places. Carol says, neighboring city, Kiefer House, the Kiefer Mansion, yes, in Thorold, absolutely. The Kiefer Mansion, even if it's in Thorold, super important to sense of place and streetscape. I use it as a landmark because that sort of weird area of Thorold I get lost in all the time. So, because it's weird. Only the streets, not Thorold. The streets are straight. I get lost easily. I'll just stop there. Jen, I highly recommend going to the yes. Marilyn I. Walker School when it opens. Definitely go there. This is so much fun. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, the BME Church in Salem, BME Salem Chapel, of course, on Geneva. I had a bit of a mind blank there. So yes, definitely. And I think that may be a lecture topic featuring the folks who run it. Maybe someday, we'll see. Sometime in the future. I think it would be great to hear from the BME Church, absolutely. And then Brian says the Hoffen building is really interesting. Of course, traces of the Hippodrome Theater in the basement. Well, that is definitely the cliffhanger I want to leave. I want to leave this lecture on, except that Belle just also put in Lockmasters houses. History of Lockmasters is also a lecture. Boy, oh boy. Again, as I said at the top of our lecture this evening, we could be here for hours. But again, I think I'll leave that interesting comment from Brian as our cliffhanger until the next lecture series about some of our local architecture. Thank you so much, everybody, so much for joining in tonight's lecture and for participating so much in the comments. It's great to hear from you all and participate in a little bit of nostalgia. And I think everyone would agree that we can't wait until some of these buildings, the ones that are still in existence, of course, would open back up and we can visit them again. So cross your fingers, everybody, on that one. And we'll see you next week for our next lecture, Holding the Torch High, Remembering War in St. Catharines. Until then, everybody, thank you so much. And stay safe, stay cool, and maybe dry. Bye, everybody. Thank you.